This week, on a very special edition of Maker Update, Donald and I break down our favorite projects, trends, tips, and tools from all of 2021.
Hey everybody, this is the odd, awkward year-end Best of Maker Update edition for 2021. I'm Donald Bell.
I'm Tyler Weingartner, and we've just got a list of our best projects, our tips and tools, and our maker trends over the course of 2021 that we talked about and that we saw and we thought was really cool this year.
Yeah, and there's nothing, I should preface this that there's nothing very formal about this. These are just like Tyler and I kind of combing back over the year's episodes and thinking about the projects and tips that stuck with us. And kind of choosing just a handful each, which was tough. But yeah. But it's a fun opportunity to kind of go back and look at some of the projects that at least stuck with me. I'll start this off with the Lucas VRTech open source VR gloves. That was one of those ones that felt like it definitely skyrocketed. It was one of those projects that, you know, was definitely a maker DIY project. It's it's our territory, but I felt like it kind of hit the Reddit sphere where it went wild, and all the gamer people, all the VR people, and all the maker people geeked out about this one all at the same time. And the kid Lucas who made this, I just loved how resourceful he was at coming up with. I mean, the whole thing really revolves around it being a very inexpensive alternative to an off-the-shelf expensive VR glove, which I don't even know that these things exist, but if they do exist, apparently they're very expensive. He's made his own version that costs about $22 per glove, and it's 3D printed. It's potentiometers for feedback. It's like those little badge reel springs to be able to reel the little strings back that are driving the potentiometers, and all of that's getting fed into inexpensive microcontroller and then into I don't know what the game software that he's using. I want to say it's I don't know, take your pick.
It's Unity or Unreal.
I think it's
one of the two. I'll bet good money on it.
I think it was like a Unity Arduino hardware combination that was able to get the feedback on it. And it pays off. It looks good. And the project, you can see all the different, he includes all the different variations of it, all the prototypes. You see 3 or 4 different versions. You see it gets skinnier and easier to use and less awkward. And the detail on it is great. And it's one of those projects where I give it a +1 because he has all the code, like everything you'd really need, the bill of materials, the code, to make this happen, to build your own. He really put a lot of thought into having this be replicatable. And I always appreciate that. And it's just one of those projects that's like punk rock. You'll probably hear me say that over and over again here, because like it's so punk that this guy like doesn't want to have to spend $300 for a VR glove, and he's going to make his own out of like badge reels and $2 potentiometers, and I just think that's really cool.
It looks like one of those projects where you set your sights really high because maybe you're new to making or building electronics and you don't know what the limits are, and it's just like, I'm going to build this out of what I have on my bench or what I can buy at my local electronics shop. Go.
Yeah.
And that's what he came up with, and that's not only an elegant solution, but also really affordable and accessible one. I remember looking at the video and going, I think I could build this with what I have on my bench, like right now.
Right. Like I actually have not been that excited about VR until I saw him like go like full punk mode on like making his own VR glove, which also makes me like, I had this feeling about it when I was looking over it this time. Like it, to me, is one of the first truly like cyberpunk projects. Like, there's all this, we have all this stuff that references this idea of cyberpunk and like the cyber deck trend and all that stuff. But this was a guy who really was like, look, it's not just if we're all going to be living in the metaverse soon enough, it shouldn't just be rich people who have the ability to use their hands, right? How screwed up is that? And so here's like $22, build it yourself VR glove that you can jack in and do what you need to do in cyberspace. So I just think it tickled me.
Yeah, that was a really good one. Moving on, one of my favorites is one just from a few months back. That was Studson Studio building a replica of Howl's Moving Castle from Howl's Moving Castle, mostly out of garbage. I mean, not necessarily garbage, but a lot of the structure of it was made of materials that otherwise most of us would throw away. I remember the body of the thing was made from a like 1 gallon kimchi jar. A lot of it was otherwise made of like other plastic food containers, like peanut jars and other things. And then from there, a lot of the details were made out of like sprues from, when you get like injection molded parts for models, a lot of the like railings and pipes and things were made out of that. I remember he made some of the piping and the ears out of, this wasn't necessarily trash, but it was stuff he bought at like the dollar store, of like these plastic dollar store saxophones, and just a lot of really cheap, inexpensive materials that all came together in this like really gorgeous model. And the video is exhaustively long. It's like an hour long, but if you watch along the whole thing, and it is a really watchable video.
It's hilarious. It's a hilarious video.
Yeah, you're going to pick up so many crafting tips along the way. Like there was the part where he needed to build a lot of like brick facades for the outside. So he cut up, I think it was like thin insulation foam into brick shapes, and then shook those up into a tumbler full of rocks. And that just all weathered and deformed them just enough that like when he glued them together onto the wall, they didn't look uniform or regular anymore. They just looked all roughed and beaten up, and just had a much more gorgeous look by the end of it. And of course, by the end, tons of painting techniques and weathering. And it's a fun video to watch. And it's just a treasure trove of tips for crafting and making models and things like that.
Absolutely. And it's one of those videos that it's so interesting to me that it got the views that it got. I mean, like hundreds of thousands of views on this video that is, like you said, like a 20-30 minute long
no it's an hour long. It's
an hour long video, like where he's kit bashing plastic junk into Howl's Moving Castle reference, which I love that movie, but I don't think is like Marvel level popularity, but people love this video. And I think part of it's like his dry sense of humor. Like I remember he's talking about how he took like the plastic bit off the top of like a hot sauce bottle, that's like that little thing that just makes, instead of it being a huge pour, it's like a little drop of hot sauce. And he talks about it coming like from Big Salsa, like the Big Salsa plastic nub at the top of your hot sauce bottle. Little things like that just made it so watchable. And also, just as someone who doesn't do a lot of model making, to see how it is roughly done, like he's using like off the shelf little rhinestones as like rivets, right? And you see them all go on, and it just looks like this bedazzled pile of junk. And then the second phase comes in where he does all the painting and all the touches and makes it really shine. And it's miraculous. You just, as an outsider, it seems impossible that all that junk turned into something so cool.
Yeah, I forgot about the detail of the rhinestones. I'm glad you reminded me of that. That was another funny bit from that, because he introduced those early on in the video of like, oh, I'm going to use these to make rivets for like all the panels that have been like bolted on as the castle's worn down over time. And then he looked back and realized, A, that looks really good, and B, I'm going to need to do this over the entire thing. And then kept a running counter of the number of rivets that went into the build. And I think it was like well into the thousands by the time he was done.
Yeah, a fun video. That was definitely a fun surprise of this year.
Yeah.
I gotta give a huge shout out to Ian Charnas. Ian Charnas made this year fun for me. All of his videos, and I feel like it's above and beyond what I would expect any maker to do. He just delivers over and over again. I specifically dropped a link to the Jetpack video. That one was one of my favorites of this year. But he did the nuclear powered Game Boy He did the Mike Tyson's Punch Out with computer vision. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones he did. Tesla coil compatible Thor hammer, when he did like the Tesla coil with like the 3D printed Thor's hammer that he then plated in metal and was able to make it conductive enough to be like, he did so many great projects. And another guy with like such a great sense of humor and such watchable videos. And it's criminal to me that he does not have like millions of subscribers.
Yeah.
I hope that will change in 2022 because he absolutely deserves it. But the Jetpack video in particular, again, it's punk rock. Like it's this thing that shouldn't be. It's ripped from like the Acme catalog. And he buys his own unregulated jet engine off of eBay. He finds a way to get jet fuel from a private airport. He straps it to his back in a way that almost burns his butt. And then he has a bunch of roller derby people go out and test it out in a parking lot. It just was like, it's such a fun video. And one of those builds where it sticks in your brain. Like I remember Ian Charnas building a jetpack that he can roller skate with.
Yeah. And also a lot of his videos have been this weird through line into like, hey, what's all the weird stuff you can buy on the internet? Because there was the jet engine that he was able to buy, and then there was the nuclear luminescent capsules that he used to power the Game Boy, or at least charge the Game Boy very slowly over 2 months.
Yeah. Great. And the more followers we can send his way, the better. Because really, it's a joy. Every time he makes a video, I'm thrilled to watch it.
Yeah. Another one that really caught me off guard was the upside down printer by Kraylin 3D. And this really caught me out because like 3D printing, particularly FDM printing, has become really mature this year. Like, well, it's been mature for a few years now, where most of the developments in them are making them get cheaper and faster and more reliable, which are all good things to have in 3D printing. But it's been a while since you've seen a new design for printers. I don't know if this is going to have any future impact on 3D printing 2 or 3 years from now, but there was a lot of cool stuff in this video. And the idea was that the print head is at the base of the printer. And similar to how an SLA printer is, the build plate moves up as the print moves. And, you know, as long as you maintain your bed adhesion, which is important for any orientation of 3D printing, it all works out. And there's a couple of benefits to this, that because the print head is down at the base of the machine, that means that it can move a lot faster and not have to worry about any of the harmonic stuff of being at the top of the machine and wobbling back and forth. So it can move faster, it can print faster. And there was a ton of other cool problems to solve in it. Like the extruder, the hot end actually had to go through a right angle bend to not have the base of the printer be really huge. And that was the other cool thing about the printer, is that because most of the structure doesn't need to be tuned or calibrated. I mean, he designed the printer so that it could be easily broken down to be portable. Because I think his goal was he wanted the printer to have a large build volume, but be able to fit into the box of a spool of filament. And he hit all those marks.
Yeah, I love that it was like this flat packable 3D printer. Like, again, like it gets the +1 for me because it's something I'd never seen before. And I do think that there's probably an underestimated market for a compact portable printer like that. It's almost like when laptops came out, like no one really thought that would be the future of computers, but here we are doing this on my laptop. But I do remember, like a couple years back, there was someone asking me for a 3D printer recommendation, and she was a teacher and she traveled to like schools in Africa and wanted to know if there was any 3D printers that would be easy to transport by plane. And of course you can, ship a boxed conventional 3D printer that way, but think of how many you could ship if they were the size of a laptop.
Yeah.
So I think there are use cases, and this might be a design that finds its way into a more commercial 3D printer.
Absolutely.
All right. What else are we talking about? The Graphimat. The Graphimat by Niklas Roy. Niklas Roy is this other maker who I've been like, he's kind of my current maker obsession. And he first was on my radar. He's from Berlin. He first got on my radar by this project he did called what was it called? Like the Fun House. It was basically like a shop window situation where there was all these different interactive elements, and someone could come up to it and scan a QR code and then be able to have like the remote control for all the little interactive features that were behind the window. He's come up with other twists on that since then. There's one he did with like the Robo Sapien. He hacked Robo Sapien, and you could move the Robo Sapien around by remote control. And I think it was like an ESP32 base type system where like the ESP32 acted as a network that you could connect to over Wi-Fi, and then you had a little simple app for controlling him. The Graphimat also has that kind of feature, but it's a totally different thing. It's this large plotter structure, and it looks so cheaply made, but that's part of the point. Again, it's punk rock. It's like it's made with cheap lumber, these DIY kind of encoder strips where you just kind of use electrical tape to make like a black and white encoder strip so that the print head would know where it is, and the inexpensive features so that you could set it up on a wall. And even if you got busted halfway through the process or you had to leave it, the materials are so inexpensive relatively that you're not out a lot of money. But fortunately, he was able to test it on this wall, and God bless Berlin. They've got like this entire like square block where it's like this pro graffiti zone where people are just invited to tag up and do graffiti on this particular section of the city. So we tested it out there, but it's so cool. It's this large structure, a large plotter. Is built for spray paint cans, and you can either put in a file and it will paint the file, or you can have it controlled over the web so that people online could like Twitch style draw something and have the Graphimat draw it out with spray paint. Or there's like an arcade joystick that you can use to move the print head around and trigger your own drawing in person. I just thought it was a cool project. I'd never seen anything like it. I'm way into plotter stuff, and this was a design I'd never seen before.
Yeah, I especially coming back to sort of the same thing as the Lucas VRTech, the VR gloves, is again the cheapness of the materials and the realization of like, oh, this is like, it's scrappy, it's raw, but it's completely functional. I mean, we saw the other end of this from Shane from Stuff Made Here, where he made not only this weird like gross plotter that covers the entire wall, but a tiny refined plotter area that's like super precise.
And his was called Shane's one was called Janksy, which I like the name of, but his was not janky at all. But this one from Niklas really was janky, but in a wonderful way.
Yeah. And the last one here is like not a really elaborate project, but a really simple one. But I think also a really relatable one from Laura Kampf, where she was walking past the river in her city, or walking her dog past the river, and found this like public bench that would otherwise be in a really nice vantage point, but the bench was just completely broken. So she pulled her van up, unbolted the thing, and then brought it back to her shop, and then rebuilt the frame of the thing, and then built new bench seats for it out of scrap lumber. I think she built the bench seats out of pallet wood, and then went back and reinstalled it. And as a project, it's really simple. But as a creative expression of like looking around in your community and saying, what can I do to make this better? Because I think that's, we're going to get into more of this later, but the last 2 years have been kind of rough on just about everybody. And I think we're all left with this question of like, well, what can I do to actually improve the state of the world right now? And not that a public bench is like a huge grand stroke gesture of making the world better, but it's something that somebody else can come across and go, well, this is nice. Somebody put work, somebody cared enough to put work into this to make this better. And I think that if you're struggling for inspiration on a project and you see something like that, I think it's really fertile ground to do something to make a contribution to where you live and improve the lives of somebody else.
Yeah, it's as my son likes to say, it's a wholesome video. It's a feel good video, right? And I keep using this term punk, but again, anyone who knows Laura's stuff would think that fitting too. Like she's, who needs permission to go and fix something like this in your community? If it's like, if no one else is going to do it, it's just going to sit there derelict, but it's something you have to see every day. How cool is it to take it on as your own project and be careful about it in a way that, like, don't invest too much of your time in it if the city's going to come in and pull the bench away next week, but they haven't probably for months in this case, and you can do something about it. So why not do it? I think +1 for Laura for including such cute footage of her dog in this video. That's another reason it's a feel-good video. Let's move into some trends. We've gone through some projects. Just every year has its own like little fads and trends and maker fashion things. For me, plotters was a big one I noticed this year. I feel like for a few months there, I was like really struggling not to make some of these plotter projects a project of the week because there were so many amazing ones coming out. But as we already mentioned, there was the Niklas Roy one here, the Graphimat. Then there was the Janksy, and then there was also another German artist. I think I put it down here. Came up with the really cool plotter that was would already take your picture and you can install it. It was a smaller scale one, and it had the odd arm action on it, where it was the Felix Fisgus Pankraz was the name of the project. Pankratz pictograph. And that was like a project for, I think it was like a grad school project, like a kind of capstone project with the Raspberry Pi and not computer vision, but a lot of visual processing of the image it was taking. I just feel like plotter projects, more than usual, came up a lot this year. Maybe it's the nature of people wanting to do something that they could do at home, make some art, or who knows what was in the air, but plotters.
I mean, plotters are just unspeakably cool when you see them. Yeah, because it's we can't. I mean, watching a 3D printer is cool for a while, but we can't extrude plastic out of our hands, but we can write with our hands. So it's seeing a machine that we can connect with and say, I can do that same thing. And this does it completely differently, but it's still producing a result that's beautiful to look at. And I that's how I've always felt about plotters. I know one that's kind of another project we saw that's kind of plotter adjacent. I'm forgetting the name of the woman now, but I'll include her video and her name in it. But there was she developed a Python script that if you do a ring of nails on a board and then you can string art, or you can string black string across it, you can create a portrait. She developed a Python script that you would send it an image, and then it would calculate where all the strings needed to connect to create a portrait out of it. And
another one you're talking about.
Yeah.
There was one I didn't include it. I had this on the tips for a while, but there was the software out there for doing stitching too. I think it was one that Becky Stern had hit me too. It was like, but that's another one of these kind of plotter-esque or plotter adjacent technologies of like the embroidery machines and everything that you can do with those. I feel like that's becoming a little bit more advanced now too.
Yeah. One of the trends that I noticed over the course of the year was, I'm just going to kind of put it all under the umbrella of what I'm going to call sustainable making. And you can blame that on the expense of lumber or the supply chain shortages or whatever you want to blame it on. But I just started noticing this trend of people, and upcycling has been a huge topic around makers for a long time. That's nothing new, but seeing a lot more people making stuff out of either materials that they have left over from another project or materials that you would otherwise throw away. And this goes from everything from Laura making the bench out of pallet wood, which again, people making projects out of pallet wood isn't particularly new, but it's always great to see people do new stuff with that. And then there was like Zach Friedman's video about filaments that are try to resolve about keeping those plastics that people use out of the ocean. Or in one case, there was an organization that makes filament out of retired fishing nets that are all made out of nylon. So, and then again, but going back to like the Howls Moving Castle thing, where here are all these food containers that most people, when the food is out of the container, they would throw them away. And Suds in studio says, no, wait, I can make stuff out of that, and then makes a really gorgeous replica out of that. Or a lot of, we also saw a number of projects this year of people making stuff out of cardboard pulp, and also starting with how to start making stuff, how to turn that cardboard into pulp that then you can reform, and how to, downloadable 3D printable molds that you can make stuff out of, and just all across the board, makers trying to figure out how to get more out of the materials that they already have.
Yeah. And you talking about it just reminded me how I've been seeing more and more projects that are making use of mycelium too, of using like mushroom, material to like grow inside of molds, much like the cardboard pulp, and create things that way too. And I've been seeing that in like both the education community, but also in the maker community too. And I feel like that's this interesting trend of like making things that are kind of as strong as leather and growing them in molds and then being able to use those. It could be a cool new territory for us. Also, I've been resin 3D printing was one of those things where it was kind of like, it was always humming along, but I feel like the affordability of inexpensive resin-based 3D printers this past year has really seen that category take off. And it's been fun to see, and it almost convinced me I need to get a resin 3D printer. I'm still not there yet, because it does seem like for me there's more cleanup and fidgetiness than I can tolerate from a 3D printer. But the output of it and the results look amazing. The resolution on these things looks crazy. If I was really into making small detailed stuff, I would be jumping on it right now, but seeing all the projects that came out this year that involved resin-based 3D printing was pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm dangerously close to that same decision. I finally did my first SLA print at my makerspace earlier this year, and especially after doing years of FDM printing, it was remarkable to say, like, wow, that's all there is to it. Because aside from the post processing, which there's not a whole lot to that too, but there's not a whole lot of printer setup to do. You kind of it's almost like that magical appliance you want 3D printing to be, where you put a file in it and you hit go and you walk away from a couple hours and then there's your part.
Yeah. No, I'm making too much of it. I'll get there eventually, but yeah. I do. It's one of those things where I will kind of need the right project to push me enough to go after it. Another one I saw a lot of this year was AI-based or computer vision or machine learning-based projects, which makes a lot of sense, especially since the technology for it is getting more affordable, and that there are companies. I want to say companies like TensorFlow, but TensorFlow is really a Google owned organization now. But TensorFlow was doing a lot of projects and competitions to get people to create projects. DIY projects with TensorFlow, machine learning, and some cool stuff came out of that. And I feel like Adafruit's also done a really good job championing computer vision in their products and guides too. It's starting to really come into its own.
I still really need to come up with a good project to that, so I have the excuse to play around with it. I know there's a web-based machine learning computer vision thing that you can use. You just use your webcam and train a machine learning model, and then I think I trained it to tell the difference between my cat and a thumbs up, or something really ridiculous early examples, but just to say, hey, taught a computer how to do that.
Yeah.
But
Well, I
then,
think that's the other aspect of it too, is that webcams have become so good by default, or so available in this Zoom world that we all live in now, that that element to it has become easier because everyone has something that they can plug into some kind of computer vision setup.
yeah. And then seeing the examples both from Ian Charnas's video of how he put himself into Punch Out and then made that web accessible. And also James Bruton's recent video of how he made these robots that people can interact with and make them dance. And it's using the same sort of 2D human body skeletal mapping to do the exact same thing of, people can dance and pose and then the robot does the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And like stuff like that, it looks super fun and compelling, and I want to play with them.
Well, I think it'll be a trend that it's going to be with us for a little while. It's one of those things like IoT, where there's a big corporate motivation behind making the technology inexpensive and harvesting the different projects and ideas out of the community that can trickle up into commercial products. I think that same thing's happening with AI tech and computer vision and machine learning right now too. Mechanical keyboards, another one that's been humming along fine for a long time now. And I think a lot of people would rightly say like, hey, this isn't a 2021 trend. But I do feel like I saw, if you can roll this into like the cyber deck phenomena, and I think also people being at home in lockdown in a home office environment and thinking about what they can trick out to kind of personalize their home office experience. I think more people than ever have tried to figure out like macro pads and Twitch Stream Deck kind of projects and things like that have been making use of mechanical keyboards and macro keyboards and all of that. There's so many of those projects. I had to start tuning them out at some point, or else it was just going to be like macro keyboard project weekly. Right.
But I mean, we also saw a couple of cool products surrounding that too. I know that Adafruit has their like macro pad based around the RP2040 that, it's just a thing you can solder a couple of mechanical keys into, and they have a cool little macro pad for your desktop or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not trying to hate on it. I just noticed it was an explosive year for those kinds of projects, right?
Yeah. I picked up a couple of mechanical keys. I think I want to make a like control dongle for my CNC machine, but the other one that's begging me to do is I realized that every button interface for a microwave always has that like membrane over the contact points, kind of interface. And I hate those things. I kind of want to make a mechanical key interface for a microwave. I feel like this would probably get me kicked out of the house. So maybe if I have a need for a machine or a microwave down in my shop, maybe I'll do that. But
I do feel like, living with my family here, if I had a, well, actually my kid has a mechanical keyboard up in this room, so I have to hear it all the time. But it's also how I know he's like, in his happy place. I can hear the mechanical keyboard clicking away. Yeah.
Yeah. But they're fun. And it's cool to see, especially if you dive deep into people who are making their own keyboards, is learning all the different types of terminology. Like if you like jargon, get into, start reading about the different types of mechanical keys and minimalist keyboards, and like how simple people can make a keyboard that suits their needs and cuts out all the fat that they don't.
Yeah. Yep.
And the last one for me is makers talking about mental health. And as I mentioned earlier, the past 2 years have been kind of rough years for everybody for different reasons. And it's becoming more commonplace for people to talk more openly about mental health and getting help with it. And I definitely saw it in the maker community as well, which isn't surprising because, making it's something that takes a huge amount of intellectual and emotional investment, because you're often throwing yourself into areas of knowledge that you don't have yet. So you have to worry about like, oh, do I know enough to even be able to try and tackle this problem? It takes a ton of creative and emotional energy. It takes a bunch of time. And it's really easy to fall into a hole where you just go, is this even worth my time? Wouldn't it be better for me if I just watch 5 seasons of whatever TV show on the couch instead?
Yeah,
and
I think you also need to acknowledge that like it's the maker community and the Venn diagram of makers and YouTubers. So much of it is the mental health issues related to trying to build a brand and a profile online and hold yourself accountable to your own schedules and ideas of how much output you expect to do on a weekly basis in terms of getting videos together and getting projects done on a deadline, whether they're an artificial deadline or not. I mean, managing personas, managing your ideas of success, managing and in a time where we're all living inside of our own like hyper focused bubbles and don't have anything to distract us from obsessing over all these things. It's tricky. I think it's especially I think younger people trying to really define themselves and make a name for themselves in the YouTube world. I think we're seeing, as a parent, I mean, I'm seeing more of the news around the dangers to your mental health in terms of social media for my kid. I think that those still scale up to younger people in their 20s trying to make a name for themselves on YouTube generally. It's tricky, and I'm glad people are talking about it, but I think it is doubly not dangerous, but doubly stressful to be a creative person and putting those kinds of creative demands and expectations on yourself on top of thinking about a faceless audience's demands for your creative output too, and expectations. And I think we're starting to see some pushback around that. I think some healthier boundaries around what we should expect creators to do. And I'm glad the conversation's happening.
Yeah. And I think it's also just refreshing personally, to, think inside my own self when embarking on a project or hitting the spot where I want to lose momentum and just going, yeah, this is really hard. And then, looking to YouTube for inspiration, you always see these like bright, enthusiastic faces that are super excited about their projects. And then, have them shift into a mode where like, yeah, it is really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking to a failed YouTuber right now. Like half the reason I did this show, or maybe more than half, is because I knew that if I was going to find a way to do something long term as a maker that would be in the world of making, that I knew I couldn't put on myself with all my other demands. This idea of doing a project a week, my life is just would not allow that. I would drive myself bonkers trying to do that. It just, I knew from the start. I'm glad I at least had a healthy sense of my own limitations to know that wasn't something that I could do, and I'd have to find another path. And I'm glad I found this one. It's been great to know that this is a video series that I can realistically, especially with your help, Tyler, thank you, get out the door every week. But the idea of cooking up something from scratch that's going to get the ultimate number of views and living with its success or failure on a weekly basis, I can't handle that. And I tip my hat to the people who can, but also they shouldn't have to feel like they have to be in this, rat race to get content out there that is quickly forgotten about. It's a tricky business.
Yeah, for sure. So we want to talk about some tips and tools?
Yeah, let's talk about some tips and tools. Now we got, there's so many great ones this year. This was kind of actually harder to come up with a short list of this one than maybe even the projects. But I mean, I think if we had to talk about a board that really surprised people this year at the beginning of 2021, it was the Pi Pico, right? Raspberry Pi coming out with a microcontroller, a $4 microcontroller. I think people flipped out, and it was an interesting kind of rubbernecking of opinions around it, where it was like, why would they do this? They're the Raspberry Pi people. They should be making computers. And then pretty quickly, everyone was like, this is an outstanding chip and board. And then everyone came out with their different flavors of that same chip in a different form factor. And now it's everywhere. And then it really helped, for better or worse, that there is this chip shortage that affected everybody apparently, except for Raspberry Pi and this particular chip. So it just found itself everywhere in a time where so many other chips were unavailable.
Yeah, I mean, it was just kind of this perfect storm of like something that's really affordable, has a ton of GPIO. It will accept a ton of different languages for you to program, whether you want to work in the Arduino IDE or MicroPython. You can also get CircuitPython to work on there, can't you?
I have yet to do a project with it. But I'd imagine so, especially since Adafruit has adopted it for a few of their boards. But
yeah. So far, the only project I made with it was I built that smartphone oscilloscope, the Scopy, which all I did with it was wire up some connections to it and then install the image onto it, and then said, well, I think I'm done. And I was done. So I haven't really built anything on my own with it, but I did that. And so for that, thumbs up for the Raspberry Pi Pico.
Yes, absolutely. I'm glad it's here and keeping things interesting. I think what's surprising to me, and maybe a little bit about it, is that I haven't seen more projects with it. It's an interesting time with both the chip shortage, but also simultaneously there's a lot of inexpensive boards out there. You'd think having a $4 board would make it like it would just blanket the earth, but there's actually so many relatively inexpensive good boards out there now. I'm still seeing a lot of ESP32 based projects. I think as many as or more than I would expect to have seen this year. I think Adafruit, like the Trinket series and the Itsy Bitsy series that they've done has been really effective at hitting the inexpensive high utility board. And the Pico is just another choice, but I do think that it was a smart choice for Raspberry Pi. I also imagine that what they've done in the education market with Raspberry Pi standard boards, they're going to keep hitting with the Pico too. I do think it's an education focused board in the way that like the microbit is. That's going to just the demand for it and the projects we'll see from it will just grow.
Definitely. Speaking of chip shortages, one thing that was really good to see this year was the Great Search series from Adafruit and from DigiKey. And if you haven't seen any, hopefully, if you're watching this, you've probably heard us talk about it a bunch. But this is a series by Lady Ada where she just, if you're not good at the DigiKey search engine yet, this will help you get good with it and make it less intimidating. But a bunch of the stuff she talked about this year was areas around the chip shortage and helping you navigate, like if you're trying to source parts for your project and you keep seeing stuff where stuff is either out of stock or you need to buy stuff with like a lot of 1,000 to even get in the door with buying them. And what the different terms mean that makes sense if you buy from electronic sourcing places regularly, but might not make sense if you're just a person at home. She helps you get through all of that and understand what everything means.
Yeah. I'm just watching a few of these. I've learned so much about the components that she's talking about. Like it's, in some ways, it's a good educational series for just understanding, what kinds of switches are even out there or transistors and what the different varieties would even mean for a novice maker like myself. But I do think that it was a really valuable resource for people who are doing prototyping and making boards and trying to find alternative sources for some of these components. It was a great series to get out the door this year.
Yeah.
The other board of the year, I mean, I do feel like Raspberry Pi kind of ties for first. They hit the Pico at the beginning of the year, and then was the Pi Zero 2W. Is that, I think, the full name for it? It's
Pi 2
or W2. W2 sounds taxi. I feel like it's 2W. But the more powerful version of the Wi-Fi capable Raspberry Pi Zero, right? And the Raspberry Pi Zero has been a board I started getting into using it a lot, and then the kinds of projects I wanted to do really did require the more powerful. I was doing a lot of things with the 3, which was inexpensive enough for a while, or the Raspberry Pi. Is it the A that has just like the one USB port? But really wanting to use the Zero form factor, but it just not being quite powerful enough for some of the stuff I wanted to do. The fact that they have now this Raspberry Pi Zero 2 that is powerful or more powerful than some of the existing solutions for the bigger Raspberry Pis makes it a go-to for me from here on out.
Yeah, I think one of my first projects with the Pi Zero was just running Octoprint on, and it was cool because like basically I had this like big webcam that was the computer and the camera that was my solution for Octoprint. But then I realized like, oh, it would get bogged down in bigger prints, and if I didn't restart it constantly, and I ended up replacing it just because it was hurting the print performance. But maybe I need to revisit that so I don't have to. Yeah.
Either way, the fact that you can spend like, what is it, $14-15 for a Raspberry Pi for a board that is equivalently powerful to what like the Raspberry Pi 3, I want to say is, which would have previously been, a $30 board or more. I just think that it makes that all the more accessible for doing cool projects. I'm glad it's out there.
Definitely. This is the next one is this video that spoke really specifically to me as a person who makes videos. And of course we couldn't get through a tip section without talking about the Crafsman Steady Crafting. But he did an entire video on how to record sound and how to add sounds to your videos, whether you're talking about recording voiceovers or recording sounds that you want to add in to make your videos more exciting or more fun to watch. Adding like little whip sounds for when you're moving stuff in and out of frame. Just those little sounds that like sweeten up your video and make it more fun to watch. And he went through a whole video of talking about different microphones, different recording techniques, and what to deal with when you live near an airport and you're constantly getting sounds of planes flying over your house and how to deal with that. And it was a great video. And while I'm not an audio engineer, I am really picky over sounds in videos. And there were I still learned a ton about it. And also it's just a really fun video to watch.
Yeah. A series or a maker who's definitely helped improve my 2021. Like that was my Crafsman's channel is my comfort food, my maker comfort food. And I'm glad he was there. He's one of the makers I definitely support on Patreon because his content really is a delight to watch and improves my quality of life on a week-to-week basis. So big thumbs up on that one. Also, he did a great one that I remember on this year for making your own font that I think I included in this list for a while and then took it out for time. But the font making one I thought was a really interesting video that he did too.
Yeah. I almost included that one as well. So just a quick shout out. Like there's a service and we'll put it up in the video too, or at least I will, that you just get these sheets of paper that you write out each letter in your font, and then you scan them and you send it off to them, and then they turn that into a font. I had access to some font making software early in my design career, and it's all you design everything based on Bezier curves, and I think I got through like 2 capital letters, and that was it. And I'm like, I'm done. Also, these 2 letters look nothing alike. Making fonts is hard, but this service made making fonts easy, and it was really cool to see.
Yeah. Tim Hunkin's Secret Life of Components. Another one that was like just a joy to experience on a week-to-week basis, and kind of helped define my 2021. And Tim Hunkin, just one of those makers who I think, if you have any maker friends in England, they're like obsessed with him, rightfully so. But I was slow to kind of jump on the Tim Hunkin bandwagon. But now that I'm there, he's like my blueprint for the kind of creative retired old guy that I want to be. Like I think about competing blueprints for that. There's like the Adam Savage blueprint where of course that'd be great, but I don't think I have the energy or Mensa capacity of an Adam Savage. But I do feel like Tim Hunkin as his own genius is a more attainable goal for me. And I'm really, I'm excited to have more Tim Hunkin out there. And it was a thrill to watch this series, and also just to kind of get a preview into the kind of older weirdo I hope to become.
Yeah, definitely. This was kind of a smaller one, but it was a revelatory. Oh, wow. I didn't know that those exist. And these are the wireless LEDs that you can use in model making. So you look at stuff like the book nooks that Jen Schachter has made over the year, or any kind of like small dioramas. And you see the effort that goes into lighting those. And you have to, put your LEDs in and wire them and make sure they're diffused appropriately. And so these simplify all of that. These are just LEDs that have a little inductive coil on the back. So they're a little bit bigger than your standard 5mm LED. And then in the base of it, there's just a big inductive coil that makes them all light up. And it's a really simple solution, but it's brilliant and it's gorgeous. Just the magic of you can build your model and then add lighting as an afterthought. Seems really compelling. And
I think magic being the operative word there, right? It's one of those things where if you show it off to somebody, you're going to blow someone's mind with it.
Yeah.
And then talk to me about Cut List Optimizer. I remember this one coming up, but
yes. So this is a website. It's one of the web tools that we featured over the course of this year. And I learned about it, and then it immediately turned into the thing I used in just about any wood or basically any fabrication project I use from here on out. It's just a website where you put in your list of here's the material I need, the sizes of material I need to get cut out. You give it your stock material, and the number of sheets or pieces of stock material that you're starting with. You can tell it the width of your blade curve, and then you hit the go button, and then it just tells you, here's how many pieces of stock you'll need with the least amount of waste. It'll tell you how much material you're using, how much you're wasting, what you'll have left over. And it takes all of the grunt work out of you get out of your design phase for a project, and then you need to actually start building stuff. It takes all the guesswork out of that. And even if you leave the number of stock pieces blank, it will just tell you, hey, you're going to need 8 2x4s to build this thing.
You're going to need all of the scrap wood pile in your backyard. Yeah.
Yeah. And it works for 2D. So if you're breaking down sheets of plywood, or it also works with, if you just leave the other dimension to say, if you're just you need to know how many 2x4s you need to break down to build a bench or whatever you're making, you just put down a 1 for the other dimension. You say 96 by 1, and that's your 8-foot 2x4. And then it'll tell you it'll figure everything out for your one-dimensional cuts too. And then you can also get a PDF of the cut list, so you can easily download that and print it out and take it down to your workshop. So you don't need to haul your computer down there or make your own notes. It's a really simple but super useful web tool, and I love it.
Cool. Well, I'll match your web tool with my last little tip here, which was probably my greatest achievement maker wise this year, which was a blog post I did for the Tinkercad blog that collected 22 tips for working faster in Tinkercad. Some of you know, for the past 3 years, I've been working on for Tinkercad, doing their social media and blog posts. I've since moved on, but this was a great way to kind of cap off my time there at Tinkercad. It's I've got animated GIFs for every one of these tips. They're really simple, and I think they all lean into what is, I think, Tinkercad's killer feature, which is speed. If you can get, if you can learn the basics in Tinkercad, you can design some really cool stuff. It's a much more capable tool than people give it credit. It's free. It's web-based, so you can access it everywhere. In the time I spent at Tinkercad, a lot of these tips that I included on this list became things that really just shifted my perspective on design and helped me use the tool much more effectively and do some cooler stuff than I thought I'd be able to do in Tinkercad. So that's out there. I've got a link to that in the description. You can find a link to all of these things down in the description of this video. And I think that's going to do it for us. I mean, I think that's the longest maker update in history, but a good collection of things that we encountered, both of us producing this show throughout 2021. We're excited to give it another go in 2022 here on the DigiKey channel. A big thanks to DigiKey for keeping us supported all this year and for having all the chips left in this country for the better part of the year too. If you didn't get a DigiKey order this year, you're probably in small company. A lot of people were ordering from DigiKey this year. Let's keep that going. And Tyler, a big thanks to you for helping produce this show. It's every single episode. So I really have appreciated your help.
It's a fun show to produce, and I can't wait to do a whole lot more of them next year. And then,
all right. Thanks to everyone who's liked, subscribed, and commented on any of these videos this past year. We really do enjoy that, and it really does help out the series and help us out. So thanks to you. Have a happy holidays, and have fun in 2022.